Hi, welcome to From the Ground Up. I'm Karol Weyman. I'm your host today. I'm from Outdoor Coffee Shop. We are really excited to have Cindy Code here. She is an influencer in Outdoor Coffee Shop. Cindy, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me, Carol. I'm Cindy Code. I am currently the executive director of Project EverGreen. It's a nationwide nonprofit. I've been in the outdoor green industry for many, many years, almost 30 years. And I got my start in this industry with a trade magazine called Lawn and Landscape Magazine, which I was a journalism major. I always thought I'd go into news reporting, but I was fortunate enough to get an opportunity to be editor at Lawn and Landscape magazine, and I fell in love with the industry. The outdoor world's always been important to me, but the people that make up the lawn and landscape industry, the green industry, are just wonderful people.
Yeah, that's great to hear. Thank you so much for being here today and joining us. For listeners who are not as familiar, what is Project Evergreen and what inspired its creation?
There's lots of ways to describe Project Evergreen, but some of the things I like to say is that it brings all of the good things about the green industry are on display through Project Evergreen. And Project Evergreen and its initiatives really bring the power of green spaces to local communities. For many years, Project Evergreen is a 501c3. We're not a lobbying organization, but for many years, and even now, there's lots of issues that impact the green industry. Lots of regulations that detract from all the benefits of healthy green spaces. So in my days at Lawn and Landscape, we were always preaching to the choir. We were always talking about the environmental, the economic, the lifestyle benefits of healthy lawns and landscapes and public parks and golf courses, but we were talking to each other. So 20 plus years ago, Project Evergreen was founded really to take that message outside of the industry and really share it with local communities, local entities, businesses that wanted to make a difference in their own communities.
I think that's wonderful. And Project Evergreen has such a clear focus on healthier, greener, and more connected communities. How do you define success when it comes to a mission like that?
So many ways, but green spaces they're a vital part of a local infrastructure. They're more than just nice to have. They're important to the environment, to public health, and to connecting communities. So success comes in so many different ways. Something that's really special to me is the difference that we make in the lives of individuals in the communities. I mean, anywhere across the country, we make connections. There's the Minis in Detroit, or the Muriels in Phoenix, or the Carmens in New York City. It's personal. Everybody wants to make a difference in the park or community green space, but they can't do it alone. So that's the power of Project Evergreen, the collaboration between donors or grantors, local businesses, professional volunteers, and community engagement. So together, these projects can happen, but they can't happen with any one individual. But when you hear any of the individuals that I mentioned, when you hear the joy, the pride, the gratefulness that you can hear in their voice after we finish one of these projects, and the professional volunteers who donate their time and their talents, and just give back to make these projects happen, it's just it's hard to describe, but it's there's so much passion behind these projects, that drives the success.
To just give a better understanding of all that Project Evergreen does, it would be great for you to share a couple initiatives that really kind of tugged at your heart, or that really were most meaningful in the industry. So if you could give a couple examples of some of the parks and the communities that you touch, just some that really stand out to you as success.
Project Evergreen really started with two key initiatives. So Green Care for Troops will be 20 years old next year, but it brings together lawn and landscape contractors who provide free services to deployed military families. So they take care of the lawns and landscapes for the length of deployment, and the services vary from mowing to fertilization to aeration, fertilization, other things. But it's really a program that provides military families with a safe playing, yard for their kids, a peaceful place for stressed military families to unwind, and protecting the landscape while your loved one is away from home. So that's one initiative. And then Green Care for Communities is our parks renovation initiative. So we work in under-resourced communities to bring parks and public green spaces back to like a level playing field, then where the city can then, maintain it and grow it from there. So these two initiatives are the platforms that bring the mission, the messaging of Project Evergreen to life. And a couple examples, Detroit, we have a long-standing, partnership with the city of Detroit. We started with an 18-acre park. When we first worked with the city of Detroit, they wanted to, they showed us these, 2, 3, 4, 5 acre green spaces that needed some help. And we thought, then they took us to Pingree Park, and it was 18 acres. But you could just see that there was a neighborhood around the park, but the park was overgrown. A lot of the homes around the park were boarded up. There was nobody in the park. But over 2 years, we transformed that park. And almost immediately, overnight, the next day there were people playing, baseball in the park, or there was a dance team, practicing. There were people picnicking in the park because, it was so overgrown, people were afraid of it. And then today, the homes around, they're all fixed up. It's a lovely place to live. So that's a success story. And, we like to go back to, we don't want to ever go into a city and be one and done. We like to establish a footprint, keep the progress growing. And in Phoenix, South Phoenix, we've done quite a bit of work there. And south of downtown, the park there became, it wasn't a destination. People, kind of drove away from the park because there were some gang wars taking place on either side of the park. So the local community did a lot to bring kind of a rec center into the center of the park. And then we worked with the city and volunteers to restore the park. And it's a destination park, and it's busy all the time with adults and kids playing in that park. So those are kind of stories, that go above and beyond the environmental, but it really shows the difference that a park makes in the lives of individuals living in that community.
It's really, bringing a community together, a gathering place for people to be, and creating pride in the neighborhood and pride of, ownership of like being around this park. I think it's beautiful, really, when you think about it. And then they care about keeping it as a place to gather so that it's, what a success that is. I think you think of the lives that you save in a way with some of that, because without it, they would be doing other things, or, if it's in a disadvantaged area, I think that it has to be really difficult to turn that around. So being part of that, that's very impressive. And I know this isn't something that we had talked about, but if you could answer, how do you decide? There's so many parks out there and there's so many places. How do you decide which one you're going to help?
Yeah, that's always a question that we'd love to be in all 50 states, and we are in all 50 states in some way, shape, or form. But a lot of our work is contingent upon everything coming together. So everything from having the local professional volunteers willing to donate their time, having an engaged community. We go to community meetings. We don't assume that we know what's best for this park and for their community. So we listen to them, and we have great conversations about what would make this park, something they could be proud of. We work with the city parks department because, ultimately they're responsible for that park. And then donors to help us, to bring everything together. So it's really, all those elements have to come together, to make it happen. And then, and then growing our footprint, like New York City is one example of, we just completed our 10th project in New York City. And New York City is just a great example of, a place where green spaces are really instrumental to all the people that live, in a busy city like New York City. And a lot of what we do there is we provide accessibility into the park, and then maintaining it from there. But if you think about New York City, or any big city, but the parks really function as the lungs of a city. So, it's nice to go in and have a barbecue in your park, or, a lot of times people, have concerts in their park. But if you really think about that green space, how integral it is to living and breathing, in a busy city. So, yeah, so all of our projects need to make a difference, and we're always looking for ways to do more every year. So we just need to expand our bandwidth and have more people join us.
Well, yeah, and just hearing just gives me goosebumps because I think that the changes that you make are imperatives for so many lives, and it kind of snowballs into better and better effects. You've been a well-known voice in the green industry for years. Can you share how you got started or transitioned to Project Evergreen from being in a publication industry?
Yeah, I mean, I really learned so much for, if you think it from one perspective, I'm a journalist, I'm a writer, I like to tell the stories of business owners. But, I learned so much about leadership and, just giving back from a lot of these landscape contractors. So many of them started, just from the love of the outdoors. Many of them started, in high school. They started cutting lawns and they grew their landscape business from that, or their love of horticulture and plants, and then they grew their businesses into, multi-million-dollar businesses in some cases. But it's just a passion. It just becomes part of your, of what you do, and sharing the value of green spaces, that goes beyond just the nicety. There's so much beauty in landscaping and green spaces, but beyond that, there's, the intrinsic value to the infrastructure, and then, the public health and the mental health and the physical health, So I think, I learned so much about the value and, just kind of connecting the dots. So it's just really a passion that drives me. But then the landscape industry is really, it's like a huge family. There, people have been in this industry for so long, and now their kids are in the industry running businesses. So yeah, I guess a lot of my leadership and my engagement, has stemmed from what I've learned from, the landscape business owners.
Right. It's really what a great transition you're able to make because you have so much knowledge of kind of growing up in it, really. So the green industry has evolved dramatically over the past few decades. What changes have you found most inspiring to you?
I think kind of growing up with many of the business owners, they grew up, they learned on the job. So I think that many of the changes, became more of a business, instead of the owner, working in the business, the owner began working on the business, and bringing in a team to really make the business grow and make it profitable. So that's been over the years, and when I first started, it was more of a specialty business. You might have focused on lawn care, or arborist or irrigation, but then the landscape industry, the diversity, maintenance and installation, so growing that way. But then more recently, more women are working in the landscape industry. Many of the associations, many of the conferences that I attend, there's networking events for women in the landscape industry. It's almost like it's not a novelty anymore, but it's nice to see women growing in leadership positions, and becoming more of their influence. I think is reflected in at the local and national level, and then the technology. You know, for years we would always talk about new technology, but I think in the last 5 years that it's really been a technology evolution. With autonomous mowers and electric equipment, and all the software that's out there. So I think that's really been a huge change in our industry.
Oh, absolutely. With the automation of things, absolutely. And you really have a way to kind of build on the success or understand the success. You had mentioned when we had first talked about, it was a calculator, like some sort of way to assess how clean the air is. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. And when we talk about success of what Project Evergreen has accomplished, so much of it's been anecdotal. You can easily see in every community we go to the difference, night and day between the look and feel of a park or green space, or talking to the people in the community. It's very gratifying. It's very humbling. It's transformational. But we really, Project Evergreen wanted a way to quantitatively measure the value of the work that we do. So we spent about 3 years and we developed a clean air calculator that you can map, any home lawn, any public park, any golf course, any green space. You can map it and measure the grass, the trees, and the shrubs. And then there's a formula that will tell you how much carbon is sequestered from that property, how much clean air is produced, how many people in the surrounding area benefit from that clean air, and then how many emissions are offset by the carbon being sequestered in that property. So it's new this year. So it's something that already we can see making a difference in any of the projects we do when you can share that number. So it's quantifying the work, and it's really demonstrating the environmental value of these green spaces and why they're so integral to communities across the country.
Right. What Project Evergreen does is it's just so multifaceted. It's multifaceted because of the technology you're using to really assess the green space, like how you're improving it by putting in, the right vegetation and, improving the air quality, bringing communities together. When you think about how many hats you've worn in the industry as a journalist, a communicator, leader, advocate, how have those experiences influenced the way you lead and inspire people today? You've talked a little bit about really being really a role model for women in the industry, but I know that that is just part of it. So, tell us a little bit about that.
It's hard to explain, but I've always been, I like to get involved. So it's not just you know doing an interview and writing a story and calling it a day. Since day one I've been involved in associations. I've been involved in at every level of the industry, and I think the networking and the collaboration. I mean, any event you go to, and trade shows, I think some people could argue they're not the same as they used to be. You can get together in so many different ways, but face-to-face networking has always been something that I've loved to do. So it's just taking those relationships beyond. It's more than a professional relationship. I think I alluded to it's like a family. A lot of these events you go to is like a reunion, but just kind of there's so much passion. So just trying to corral that passion and engage people in these projects is just something that I love to do, and we've been successful doing that through Project Evergreen. So I think that that's really providing the landscape industry. They're so generous, they want to give back. Project Evergreen provides the platform and the way to give back. So they don't have to do any of the planning. They come together, and it's not putting a burden on any one person. The more people you engage in it, it's not a heavy lift in most cases, sometimes. But I don't know if that answers your question, but it's just it's just taking the best of what the people in the green industry have to offer, and putting a spotlight on it, and making it work for these communities.
I mean, you're really creating a road to succeed. And I do think that, by being so organized and having it, it's so much easier for people to get involved when there's a platform as great as Project Evergreen. It's definitely, it brings people together, and the authenticity of the landscape space, the outdoor space, the people that are involved in outdoors. I think that there is a genuine passion to be able to share those types of things with everyone. And so it's amazing what you're able to provide, and how you bring people together. I think is, there's such a need for it. So thank you for that. What's next for Project Evergreen? Can we talk about that? Like, what are you excited about for the future?
Yeah, I mean, we're excited to grow our clean air calculator. It's in its infancy, just released. So we're excited to develop that further and see where, it can really make a difference. And we've already, worked with some sports turf managers across the country and showing the differences, between natural grass fields and, artificial turf fields, kind of measuring the value there, and other areas that have looked at, sometimes green spaces are viewed as, wasters of resources, in water deprived areas, but, the calculator can make a difference there. So it's not just measuring the carbon sequestration, but the messaging around it, the value of that green space and what it means environmentally. So I think that there's so much more we can do there with the clean air calculator. The Green Care for Troops will be 20 years old next year, and the thousands of lives that program has changed, and the feel good stories. So we're looking for ways that we can expand that program as well. And I also want to mention that we're a small organization, but we have a very active volunteer board, that from people all across the country, from inside and outside the industry. So it's a lot of companies that are working together to make a difference. And suppliers are financial donors to Project Evergreen, but they also donate materials and other resources that are needed to get these projects done. So I don't want to start naming people because there's like too many people to name.
You'll leave someone out, right? It's right.
Yeah, but it's a vast network of people that really are working together. It's not just one company representing a single entity. It's the fact that everybody can collaborate, to make this happen. So there's a lot of power and energy behind Project Evergreen, and it's growing every year. So we're looking forward to, reaching more communities, next year and in the years to come.
If someone wants to get involved in Project Evergreen, your website is projectevergreen.org, but do you have a list of future sites that your company is going to be working on? Is there anything that's proposed? What's the best way for people to get involved if they're interested in helping a specific community that you're working with?
Check out our website. We're always looking for, we list of volunteers all across the country, even if we're not doing a project right then and there. But, I guess the best way is just to reach out to me. It's really easy. Cindy Code at projectevergreen.org. So I'm easy to find. So yeah, a lot of times these dialogues and conversations, you never know where they're going to take you. So the exploratory nature of those conversations leads us in so many fun different ways.
Yeah, I think that's wonderful. Well, I also want to mention that Cindy is on OutdoorCoffeeShop.com's website as an influencer. So you can find information on her directory about Project Evergreen, Cindy herself, and it leads you to her website. So I just, in closing, I just want to say thank you so much for all that you do for the industry. Thank you for joining us today on From the Ground Up. And is there anything you want to say in closing?
No, thanks for the opportunity, and we're excited about what you're doing for the outdoor green industry. So we're excited to be a part of it and network with your audience.
Yes, that's wonderful. Well, great. Well, thank you for joining us today. And thanks to everyone out there who's been able to listen to From the Ground Up. Enjoy your day. Thank you.